Well, it has been an extremely busy week. It all started from the 20th of August. We had to go and see the defendant, psychiatrist, consultant, psychiatrist, and my wife had a terrible day that day, and this is all 4.5 years later, since the accident. But anyway, he gave her quite a hard time, told her that she should be trying harder to answer his questions, and then interviewed me and told my wife that he was going to give us a home visit on the 28th of August. So basically, he don't think that she's trying hard enough to answer his questions, and he booked a home visit for 28th of August, and he came here. I agreed to it because we've got nothing to hide. I mean, it's very unusual for a psychiatrist to be coming to our home, but he did, and after upsetting her, I had my doubts that I was hoping he doesn't start that over here because I don't think I would tolerate it. But after interviewing her here and gave her a load of questionnaires to tick off and God knows what else, and then he asked could he look around our home, so thought it was highly unusual, but I agreed to it. He could look around our house, and but this is all very unusual to me for the defendants. Now here you've got a company that nearly killed us, and you got their psychiatrist telling a person with a mild brain injury that she's not trying hard enough to answer his questions, and then coming round your home and inspecting every room in the house. It's a bit, to me it's extremely boggling, to think that here we are, victims of a horrific injury, and we have got to go through all these types of behavior. Not only is the cost and all that, we are expected to go to all these meetings that they set up for us, but we haven't had a penny for all these costs that is accumulating. Well, one of the reasons why he thought my wife wasn't trying hard enough was because she didn't know where she was born. She said she only knew that she was born in London, but London is quite a big area. And I was a bit, wondering myself why she didn't know where she was born. And then I hunted down for her birth certificate because she didn't know where all these things are. So when I found her birth certificate, I thought it was very interesting. It hardly gave any information, who her parents were or nothing. And I think whether y'all can see it here, just got her name, it's got her name and Willesden and Wembley. I think let me just move it. Registered district of Wembley. Well, my wife, as a young girl, she never knew at all that she know anything about Wembley or Willesden, because they lived somewhere in central London, basically. But I suppose the closest area, for the registry must have been in Wembley. Or was it in Willesden? So I think that is why she just didn't know where, the registry where she was born. But she knew she was born in London. But where she was registered, she had no idea, or which part of London she was supposed to be registered at. So it's, this is quite interesting to think that, a psychiatrist that's dealing with a patient that has a mild brain injury that can't remember these things, that he found it, well, I must admit at that time, because he was so abrupt to her about not being able to remember where she was born. She did say London, but London is extremely big area. But I think I have an interesting guy that I would recommend that you'll go to neuroscience in a Google group. John, how do you do, John? He's a remarkable fellow, very, very helpful. He's given me a lot of interesting information, and we've communicated in Google group at neuroscience, and I'll put his link on you. I think he's an interesting guy. I think anybody with needed some sort of advice in the neuro area, or have somebody with a mild brain injury or traumatic brain injury that has certain problems, I think it's a very helpful area to get some information. So basically, that is one of the reasons that he wanted to come round here, is because she didn't know where she was born, besides saying London. But I find it very unusual for a psychiatrist to to be operating on this sort of level. You didn't give me an impression like that a psychiatrist behave like that. And this is another thing. You see, we have a defendant that basically have someone who they claim to be their psychiatrist, and they have the powers to interview you and all these things, even come here and want to look around the house. What happens if this individual isn't a psychiatrist? I've got to go through hunting down to find out, is this guy registered as a psychiatrist? So it makes you realize the legal system, how extremely flawed it is. So basically, if you want to know something about somebody, just injure them badly, so you could get every information on this individual you possibly could want. You could even go through every room in their house and find out what they eat and bloody God knows what else. To me, I just find it, this is absolutely unbelievable. And if you told me before this accident that we had to go through all we have, including letting somebody from the defendant is claiming to be their psychiatrist to go through every room, I would think it's a load of bloody baloney. But this is what we are experiencing. By the way, that psychiatrist's name was Dr. N.J. Cooling, and let's show you where he's from. He saw us at this place, and it's interesting. If anybody know, is he registered or not as a psychiatrist? And the next appointment we had was for their clinical neurologist, right, at Harley Street. We had to go on the 30th of August, and that was another appointment. We had to plod off into the city, and causes a lot of money again. And this is all, I think those who have an accident and somebody drops washing machine, you got to realize this is the sort of cost you're gonna have to counter, and we've never received a penny for none of this, for traveling up and down to visit all these defendant psychiatrists and psychologists, and that is besides your own solicitors and whatnot. So it's a highly expensive affair. By the way, this neurologist is a Dr. Nicholas Ling, and well, he's from Harley Street, and I think with Harley Street, they tend to, it's like a big joke as far as I'm concerned. Harley Street they got all these massive big buildings in Harley Street, and all these consultants hire rooms for the day or for the hour or God one knows what. It just looks highly impressive, especially for all these damn people, rich people from around the world. it's so important that they see somebody from Harley Street, but as far as I'm concerned, it's all a bloody big joke anyway. But well, that's the neurologist that we saw. You know, we had to see him in Harley Street. What I find interesting is, I think like with one of the other, I think it was a neurologist that interviewed my wife again in Harley Street, and you find that some of these consultants that work for the defendant, you know, they're quite happy to collaborate with some of these defendants, solicitors, and God knows what else, and come up with amazing stories and without any documentation. I think this neuropsychologist, clinical psychologist, said to me that he has got no information at all from the hospital of Mary's information from the hospital, but yet he's interviewed her and gone through all the process and God knows what without any information on her. But and this is the same problem we had, you know, with all the previous neurologists. You know, they come there to gather to make a records for the court with hardly any information. What I find interesting is a lot of these individuals have their permanent jobs for the NHS, you know, and the NHS, to me, to think that we've got these sort of psychiatrists and psychologists and clinical psychologists working privately for the defendant, prepared to, you know, be quite unsavory to you know, and they're supposed to be a neutral party, but I think it's a load of balls personally. But what I find interesting is it's like they go back to their hospitals that they come from, working for the NHS, you know, and pretending again to be this wonderful psychiatrist or psychologist, you know. But this is the part that I find very unsavory, that we are paying them on one hand, the NHS, through our contributions to do this job, because if you got a person that is slightly dishonest on one hand, and then, you know, they're working for us on the other hand, as in the NHS. Back to the NHS, you know, I've reported this whole thing of the behavior of the NHS consultants to the NHS Trust. NHS Trust, why have you totally ignored me? You know, I've reported this thing ages ago about, you know, saying that my wife never received a head injury, etc. You know, that came up in Dr. Clark's report. You know, the thing is, I've got photos on the internet, I've got photos at home to prove to you that she had a head injury. But why is it in the NHS report she hasn't received a head injury? Is the NHS itself corrupted? So would you please get back to me, because you promised you would. You know, the NHS Trust for the Royal London and Berks, you know. I think, you know, there is something totally unsavoury about you lot.